In the season of Lent, I've been talking about different people who heard the message. This is doing what God asks Moses hears. It's taken from Exodus 20, 1 through 17, in case you want to look that up a little later. But here's the message for you. 5 years ago, the Jewish Prime Minister Netanyahu addressed the House of Representatives, those that came, that we the people, if you might think about it, elected to lead us. Without getting into the politics of the speech, I remember he took a moment to point out the Vermont marble relief portrait of Moses that hangs between 22 other lawgivers there in the House of Representatives chamber. There are 11 coming around to the front, from the back all the way to the front on this side, and 11 going around this way and around the front as well. But the speaker stands facing Moses' portrait. When I remembered about this is that Netanyahu quoted Deuteronomy 31:6 from out of the 4 chapters of Moses' farewell words to the people before they went out to the promised land. These are the words that he quoted. Be strong and bold, have no fear or dread of them. Now he was speaking about his contemporary foes, the followers of Islam. But the rest of the sentence is this: because it is the Lord your God who goes before you. He will not fail you nor forsake you. Knowing that I would be preaching about Moses this week, it came into my mind in part because of how he used it. He was making his own point, using Moses' words, like many of us have done as well, to give emphasis and credence to what he was saying. In seminary or homiletics or preaching course, the professor called this proof texting, or eisegesis, which means fitting the text into what we want to say. But in fairness, the Prime Minister was not preaching, he was a politician. The text was Moses' words at the end of his life of service to the nation, and more importantly, his service to God. He has in life faced his own past, he has faced his own inadequacies, and he's faced Pharaoh. He has also faced the frustration and anger of his own people, along with worry that any good leader would have. And on top of the mountain, he faced God. Does the unknown future cause him dread? No. Oh no. That he confronts Moses in the burning bush. Sorry, I made a mistake. Let me go back there a second. I asked, does the unknown virtue cause Moses dread? And the answer is no. What about the possibility of hostile people across the border where his own people will travel? Does that cause him fear? No. And the reason is the last half of the sentence that the Prime Minister left out of his quote. Because the Lord your God goes before you, he will not fail you nor forsake you. Good words for us today. But will we allow God along on our journey of life? Moses' own life, I think, is instructive. Born in Hebrew at a time when the Egyptians worried about the strength of this servant-slave people, he escapes death as an infant, and amazingly, he is adopted son of Pharaoh. Given education, position, a future, he seems all set. But he's aware of the situation of his own people, and eventually he strikes the slave master, killing him, and Moses runs away. Oh, it takes time, but he runs right into the arms of God, who on a mountain reveals the holy name and presence. So you think Pharaoh is frightening? Try a burning bush that isn't consumed, and out of which comes a voice that says, I am who I am. But first, do you think Moses was prepared to hear God's voice? He's on the run. He ends up with a wife and a job shepherding. The years go by and old Pharaoh dies, but Moses doesn't know it. The Hebrew people are suffering worse. He's just simply tending sheep. My imagination, or maybe I'm remembering one of the old movies, it gives me a picture of Moses going after an unruly young sheep. He climbs a mountainside, and he's looking for the sheep. It's probably a teenage sheep, whatever that looks like. And as sometimes happens, the kid places him just where he will meet God. God, the God of Moses' ancestors, the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, is not appearing simply to comfort Moses or to help him locate the errant sheep. Oh no. God confronts Moses in the burning bush. What could have prepared him to hear the voice of God? I choose to believe that from the earliest days when his own mother who was without the knowledge of Pharaoh's daughter, became his wet nurse, his caregiver, I believe she told him stories, maybe teaching him Hebrew songs. While his formal education is Egyptian, the close relationships in his life fill in the important facts of faith. He probably all but forgot about this until the moment of confrontation. Sure, he's older, but he still knows his heritage. He still wonders what he might be beyond a shepherd. Who is he? A renegade Egyptian prince? A murderer? A slave who had a great life handed to him, but he messed it up? Different folks might suggest one of these to him given the chance, but it is what he thinks, what he wonders, that is important. You see, one needs to be open to the question in order to hear the answers. One needs to see a larger picture in order to see a larger God, to become a greater person. And there on the mountain, the one whose story has been told to him from his earliest years gives Moses, the adult, a sense of a larger story. I am who I am, says God. And the fullness of this name is much more. It carries the past, I have been who I have been, the present, I am who I am, and the future, I shall be who I shall be. God isn't going to fit into any box of logic that Moses might construe. God isn't going to simply be a servant to Moses, giving comfort and ease. God is God. I am who I am. The name is majestic, it's power. And for Moses, the name is compelling. But hearing is not accepting. Moses takes some convincing as to any worth that he has to be an instrument of God. And truth be known, he takes some convincing to take on the identity of believer or follower. It rather makes me think, maybe you too, how are we doing in claiming the identity and following? To do what God asks, it takes us where we may not want to go. It requires of us witness that we may not want to do because it puts us in the wrong side in our standing with friends or position in society. Even our lives may be in jeopardy. Well, you know what happens. He goes and confronts Pharaoh. He declares the name of God. He gathers the Hebrew people and brings them into the desert. I'll skip all the hassles before and after this, all the drama that occurs on the way to the holy mountain where these commandments that you can read about were given. But in this place, the people too hear the voice of God. They don't want to get near. They only want to hear it from Moses, secondhand. And it's touch and go with these stiff-necked people, so it seems. Still, they are formed during this day. These years in the wilderness, they are formed as a people, specifically are formed as God's people. And what it is meant by that is that they accept the role of being a particular vessel of God's grace through which will come salvation. They don't know what this will mean, but there on the mountain, they are given a new identity. Moses hears, he perseveres, doing what God asks, and the people become the children of Abraham. Sure, but more, the people of promise, the people of God, people of the law. In every age, the law is in danger, of becoming a tool for rulers instead of guidance for people. Additions and stipulations are tacked to it. Human beings, being what they are, often want things a bit more defined, assuming that's better. Just consider the book of Leviticus. But if we seriously take that all the lawgivers on the walls of the House of Representatives would put Moses at the center as the first and greatest, how would we look at the law? It seems to me the giving of the law was the beginning of enlightenment, but not the end result. We cannot define ourselves into a utopia. A change of heart, a commitment to service and caring, and acceptance that God might give us a larger identity is needed. Moses heard from God. He did as God asked, and the people were blessed because of his actions. The law itself was for the people of God. They were to shine as a light to the world by trying their best to adhere to it. It was never intended to be forced on another person in some public display, nor become a burden so that one must count the number of steps to be taken on the Sabbath, or which animal needs to be sacrificed for the purpose of a burnt offering. The law was meant not as a club to pound over another's head. It was given to be lived out so that each community would be blessed. Each in the community would be blessed, learning how to live, giving and receiving compassion. The law was given to help us do what God asks. Here is where it helps us to remember that the law has a purpose. You know, our legislators in government make laws, change laws, add to laws, and I wonder sometimes if they remember the purpose of the laws, or if we do. The preamble to the Constitution gives us a larger picture. It says, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, you know these words, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity, do ordain and establish the Constitution of the United States. For those of us who follow Christ, it's good to remember, or when needed, good to be reminded, the purpose of God's law, especially when we have added to it, amended or subtracted from it, and somehow made it into what God never intended. Does our understanding and living by it foster good character? Does our understanding foster growing, positive, restorative relationships with one another and with God? Obviously, in our reading from John's Gospel, the people in the temple needed reminding. There was a lot of people there who were following the laws, the purpose of worshiping God. They couldn't use Roman money, so there were money changers who changed the worshipers. You needed the sacrificial animals, so sellers set up shop. So costs went up during peak seasons. It isn't long before the law as intended morphs into the law of our own design, no longer bringing us to God, satisfying personal gain or sustaining a system that doesn't bring justice, peace, and joy. It is then that confrontation is needed, but in a manner that is Christ-like. You know, 5 years ago, the bridge in Selma, Alabama was crowded on the 50th anniversary of Bloody Sunday, 1965. Like Jesus confronted the temple for making the sacred place into simply another avenue of commerce, the nation needed confronting for a system that treated folks as second-rate or as of little or no value, as if they were still slaves. But the confronters didn't lead rebellion like Barabbas. They wanted to do in Jesus' day. They followed the way of Christ and left themselves vulnerable. They didn't fear, they didn't dread, because God was with them. The context of God's law is this: love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love others as yourself. And keep in mind that this is not a monetary thing or a momentary thing, but a lifelong task that involves the whole of who we are, a task we are to undertake. See, Prime Minister Netanyahu was right to say we can and should be bold. We should not dread an enemy. But venturing forth, our trust, our hope must be placed not in the strength of arms or our own understanding or in the latest technology. It is in the fact that the Lord our God goes with us, and God will not leave us nor forsake us. The Ten Commandments give us guidance. Moses, certainly Jesus, and the good Christian folks down through the centuries, by strength of the Spirit, have heard the calling of God and done what God asks. And so, the question is for us: what will we do? Be open. Ask questions. Listen for the voice of God, and realize God goes with us. As I close this time, God bless each one of you in the days that are ahead. Amen. How'd that do?